I had just turned 18, and I was back home, having passed the first stage of basic training. The feeling of returning was strange, as if the world had changed in a tiny, almost imperceptible way during my absence. Everything seemed the same, but I felt different. My cousin Sarah and my best friend Alex had always been constant companions in my life. We shared everything from childhood, from birthdays to secrets. But now something was off. Sarah was engaged to Ben, who was only a year older than her and had just started his journey in basic training. They'd been together for 2.5 years now, a fact that further compounded what I was discovering. The three of us, Sarah, Alex and I, used to chat for hours about everything in the world, but lately I'd noticed a strange tension when they were together. Their laughter seemed too forced, and their stares too long. One evening, I decided to throw a small birthday party at my house. It was a relaxed evening. Just a few close friends, good music, and the familiar haze of nostalgia that such gatherings often evoke. We laughed, reminisced, and pretended to forget that we are all at a crossroads in our lives. Toward evening, I noticed Sarah and Alex slipping into the far end of the porch, hidden by shadows. They were whispering, keeping their heads close together. I convinced myself I'd dreamed the whole thing, that the training had made me hyper-aware, even paranoid. But as I lay in bed, the faint sounds of their voices came through the open window. "Do you think he suspects something?" Alex's voice was barely audible. "No, he has no idea," Sarah replied. Her voice was quiet but clear, and I could hear the smile in his words. "As long as we're careful, no one can know." My heart raced as all the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The late-night texts, the inside jokes, the fact that Alex always ended up being there for me when Sarah was around. I wanted to stand up, confront them, scream about the betrayal they were doing in the night. But I stayed silent, frozen in a twisted mixture of anger, resentment, and denial. I listened as they talked about sneaking around, thinking I didn't notice anything. I felt kind of out of my depth, watching this horrible scene and unable to intervene. The next morning, I woke up with a pain in my heart. I walked down the stairs, and the sound of laughter hit me like a hammer. They sat casually at the kitchen table and looked like nothing had happened. I couldn't bring myself to meet their gaze, the words frozen in my throat. Part of me still hoped it was some misunderstanding, that I'd misheard, that they were talking about anything other than what I feared. Days passed, and I withdrew more and more into myself, struggling with the questions that kept me going. Should I tell Ben? He was there, going through the same grueling workouts I was, forcing himself physically and mentally to prepare for the future he thought he was building with Sarah. Just the thought of him going back to that, to her, made my chest ache. But then I thought about Sarah and Alex, about the memories we'd made together. If I revealed them, I'd ruin a friendship that had lasted my entire life. I would have blown up everything I knew, everything that was close to me. One afternoon, I tried to talk to Sarah alone. I told myself that I needed to understand, to hear her opinion, to see if there was remorse in her eyes. I asked if she was happy with Ben, and she threw me a strange look, as if I had asked something absurd. "Of course, I'm happy," she said, almost indignantly. "Ben and I are doing well." "Why do you ask?" I wanted to scream at her, shake her, and demand an explanation, but I held back. I wasn't ready to face the truth yet. I wasn't ready for the consequences. So I just nodded. swallowing my words like bitter medicine. A few days later, Alex came over, ignoring the storm raging inside me. He was the same as he always was, joking around, talking about what we'd done before, making plans like everything was normal. I laughed along with him, but the weight of the mystery was weighing on me. It was like I was living two lives, one pretending everything was okay, and the other consumed by anger, betrayal, and an unbearable sense of helplessness. In my quiet moments, I rehearsed my conversation with Ben. I imagined telling him this, looking him in the eye, and explaining that the person he trusted most had betrayed him. But each time, the words fell short, as if they couldn't convey the enormity of what I was about to discover. And each time I felt myself backing away, telling myself that perhaps it was better to keep the peace, to let them deal with the consequences of their actions. But the guilt gnawed at me. I could feel it tormenting my conscience, relentlessly reminding me of the decision I should have made. I wished I had not heard their conversation, that I could go back to the way things were before, when I knew nothing. One night, I lay in bed, looking up at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. I knew I couldn't hold it in forever. The truth was a time bomb, and sooner or later it would explode, blowing everything I was trying to keep to shreds. I had to choose between loyalty to my cousin and best friend, and the sense of justice that burned within me. In the end, I realized what I had to do. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the inevitable consequences. I didn't know how Ben would react, or if he would forgive me for shattering his world. But I couldn't live with the realization that I'd stood by silently while the people I cared about deceived him.